Our episode kicks off with Silpha telling Pazuzu to surrender already. While Albert and Tao were tangling with the bear wolves, who were Pazuzu's pals, they really had the upper hand with those critters, and just as the soldiers were about to strike again, Albert told them to hold up because they hadn't taken down the demon yet. He figured they might bounce back at any moment, so he asks the soldiers to give Silpha some backup. But then, everyone takes a tumble, even Silpha, and Tao is at a loss. Pazuzu mentions it had been over a century since he busted out of the sanctuary seal. It took him a while to cook up those lackeys, and now the adventurers were going to pay for what they did. He launches at Silpha full throttle. Albert can't get up. He doesn't get why he's so weak. Pazuzu tells Silpha they've inhaled his domination miasma, which would make them obey him. Silpha remarks she now gets why Pazuzu stinks. Pazuzu's really mad because she doesn't know when to quit. Just as he's about to wallop Silpha, Tao steps in to defend her. Pazuzu asks if Tao can even stand and tells her to butt out, while Silpha insists she's perfectly fine and orders Tao to scram. Tao tells her to stop lying, saying if Silpha can move, she should hightail it out of there. Silpha retorts that Tao should be the one running if she can move. Silpha starts coughing up blood, and Tao, seeing her like that, gets a tad worried. Pazuzu remarks on Silpha's great swordsmanship and how, even after absorbing his miasma closer than anyone else, she still challenges him fiercely, but he's baffled why Tao isn't under his control yet. Tao then tries to kick Pazuzu in the face, but he effortlessly counters. Pazuzu soon realizes Tao's using some weird breathing technique, which he finds odd, that allows Tao to resist the miasma Pazuzu's emitting. As her breathing starts to falter, she could flee since she can still move, but maybe she wanted to be his servant. He muses. After saying that, Tao gets super mad, attacking him and calling him ugly, swearing she'd never abandon a handsome guy in need. Then, she unleashes a move called Thunder Pulse, but after using it, she frets she let anger get the best of her and used too powerful a technique. She needs to stabilize her breathing before Pazuzu can do something worse. But right then, she realizes the bear wolves have regenerated. Pazuzu's holding Tao, asking who this hottie she's talking about is, as all he sees is a bunch of ugly trash strewn around. He tells her to look at her beloved lackeys getting back up at his command. He finds it beautiful, then he hits her with his maximum domination miasma. If you want Tao to get out of this terrible situation and beat Pazuzu, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so you won't miss the updates. Then Pazuzu asks if she'll serve him now and dedicate her entire life to him. Tao realizes in the end she wasn't wrong. She feels he's really there. Even amidst that foul air, she can still feel him. It's like the sun, giving her courage. Pazuzu doesn't quite get what she's talking about, and she says the most handsome guy of all is coming to kick Pazuzu's back. Then Pazuzu's bear wolf shuts its mouth, trying to swallow Tao. He finds it pathetic. In the end, she's just a human, an inferior life form to him, incapable of understanding how diabolical he is. He then grabs Silpha, saying he can't let her slip away. She'd make a fine addition to his lackeys. It might take a bit to control her, but it'd be worth the effort. Meanwhile, Lloyd's frolicking in the water like nothing's happening. Alongside Grim, Pazuzu asks how Lloyd's chilling in his miasma. Lloyd claims he didn't know, prompting Pazuzu to ask how on earth he didn't. Lloyd turns to Grim, asking if he knew the reason. Pazuzu declares he won't get away just because he can stroll around in his miasma. He spots Grim, recognizing him as a demon, and asks if he's protecting the kid, as he'd never heard of demons serving humans. He questions why Grim is acting that way, wondering if he finds it cute or something, thinking Grim's a disgrace to their species. Grim obviously doesn't like those words at all and decides he'll speak up, but then thinks better of it. Pazuzu asks him to speak, but Grim says that, considering they're of the same race, he could give some advice. But now he just wants Pazuzu to turn into ashes right then. Pazuzu gets mad, saying he'll be the one doing the turning, then orders his minions to attack. Lloyd thinks it's a perfect time to test his mana transmutation. Grim notes there are a lot of monsters, so Lloyd will need to spend a good chunk of mana. Lloyd always had trouble gauging how much he used, so he visualizes it as gentle and warm. As the bear wolves approach, Lloyd shows them an image of what his parents looked like. Pazuzu's shocked, finding it impossible. As Lloyd's lifted Pazuzu's influence over the bear wolves, Grim explains the bear wolves are craving Lloyd's mana. Grim hugs Lloyd, who asks if Grim hasn't been affected either. With Grim in his head, Lloyd asks the bear wolf that swallowed Tao to spit her out. Seems Tao was fine up to that point. Pazuzu sees Lloyd converted all that mana into a field of flowers flowers in an instant. Pazuzu acknowledges Lloyd's an incredible wizard, then decides to attack again with his miasma. He wants the bear wolves back under his control, but Grimm says they've awakened. They remembered their pride as monsters and the fact that Pazuzu killed their parents, so they all attack Pazuzu. Lloyd observes, finding it interesting how the bear wolves attack in a pack. They're extremely strong, but Pazuzu gets mad and tries something. He starts attacking the bear wolves. Furious they're like that just because he killed their useless parents, thinking they should be wiped out since they're worth less than pests. Then he threatens Lloyd, blaming him for messing up his plans. Lloyd finds it funny, as Pazuzu said the same things Grimm did earlier, but Grimm says that, until now, that had never happened, and Lloyd laughs genuinely. Pazuzu's indeed very strong, but Lloyd's no slouch either, so they start battling. Lloyd says he's happy because he'll test some new spells against Pazuzu. He can use his magic without restrictions, and Pazuzu recognizes the boy's mana is really huge. Pazuzu starts thinking it's a nightmare, as he can't understand how a kid has such an absurd amount of mana. Pazuzu tries to flee, but Lloyd wants to cage him, as he's trying to trap him inside a barrier, asking him to stop. Grimm asks how many spells Lloyd can cast at once, and they reckon if they wait, it'll be about 20, but Lloyd says with Grimm's help, he could cast even more spells, so Grimm hops into Lloyd's hand, and Lloyd tests spatial magic, dimensional enclosure, on Pazuzu. Pazuzu really doesn't get how Lloyd managed to trap him. He gets desperate, thinking Lloyd will turn him into a lab rat, but Lloyd questions. After all, hadn't Pazuzu killed not just the bear wolves' parents, as some of them clearly didn't even look like wolves anymore. He'd done hybridization experiments with other monsters. He'd done a lot with those bear wolves. So, he tells him to stop wriggling, but it seems talking doesn't help, as Pazuzu keeps thrashing about, and when Lloyd's about to act, Pazuzu stops and asks him to wait, as he'd like to talk first. He continues, saying when he rules the world, he'll give Lloyd a great position, or money if he wants, or women, and asks what Lloyd wants exactly. He goes bananas because he didn't know what to do. After all, he'd never received someone's magic in such a powerful way before, so he had a real chance of biting the dust. Lloyd gears up to unleash a bunch of spells on Pazuzu. He's about to use high-level magic from the 4 elements, but Lloyd spiced up these spells with various improvements. Pazuzu asks for just a second, but Lloyd isn't in the mood to hear what he has to say and starts preparing 240 spells per minute to hurl at Pazuzu. He'd like to keep it up for 30 minutes, finding it quite lovely, until he asks if he's alive, as it felt like he'd kicked the bucket, and it hadn't even been 5 minutes. Grimm says that technically, sorcery did have some effect on demons. It was like how sounds and lights bothered humans. Grimm explains that Lloyd caused considerable stress to Pazuzu. Then Lloyd dismantles the barrier, and Pazuzu says he spent a century in anguish creating those monsters. He wanted to rule the world. He doesn't understand how he failed so easily, and everything crumbled. Then he starts fading away, but everyone starts waking up. Lloyd decides he needs to come up with something. He goes to Albert and asks if he's okay. Albert hugs Lloyd, as he was worried. Grimm talks to Pazuzu as he disintegrates, saying he's just gathering strength to get revenge someday. Pazuzu says he entrusts his ambition to Grimm. Grimm absorbs Pazuzu's ashes and says he accepts. Pazuzu's mana had restored Grimm's strength a bit, but he couldn't defeat Lloyd yet, so, after Lloyd and the others chat for a while, they decide to head back to the royal city. The king says that Albert, for killing a demon and handling the monster he was entrusted with very well, was the second prince. The king would question his judgment in going only with his royal guards. Albert says there's no way to justify it, but the king asks where the adventurers who helped them were, Tao and Robert. Albert replies that Robert disappeared before they could regain consciousness, and Tao had vanished because she ran into the forest after being tricked by Lloyd, who said Robert was in the woods. Albert couldn't even thank her. The king was happy because the 2 adventurers had saved his children, but he was interested in the strength of the wizard named Robert. However, Albert tells the king that Lloyd had contributed the most to that hunt, which shocks the king. Albert continues, saying he would announce that Lloyd should be considered part of the royal succession. They only survived against the monsters without casualties thanks to Lloyd's enchantment on their weapons. Albert believed that his talents and dedication made him fit for the throne, but the king questioned it because it would create a rival for him. Albert didn't care if he wasn't the best choice to rule the kingdom. For him, the choice should be for the good of the realm. Albert questioned the wisdom of excluding him just because of his youth, and after saying this, he says he didn't intend to lag behind. The king asks if if Lloyd would join the fight. The king asks if Lloyd would like to stand alongside his brothers in the quest for the throne, but Lloyd humbly declines. Next thing you know, we see Lloyd running and playing with a wolf bear. He never imagined that one of them would follow them home. The rest stayed in the forest. However, Grim is getting quite jealous because Lloyd is giving a lot of attention to the wolf bear, petting it and saying its fur is soft and fluffy. Grim then makes his fur soft and fluffy too, saying he thinks Lloyd's mana tamed the wolf bear. But just as he's petting Grim, Silpha catches him. Lloyd desperately tries to hide Grim. Lloyd names the wolf bear Shiro, and Silpha thinks it's a great choice. Grim watches Silpha and Lloyd chatting, thinking Lloyd turned down the throne too easily and only cared about magic. He starts considering him a magic maniac, while the king watches him from above, finding Lloyd very modest.